In this tutorial, you'll use the DynamicPDF Cloud API's dlex-layout endpoint to create a PDF from a dlex document. The DynamicPDF Cloud API is an easy-to-use, efficient, and scalable REST API for working with PDF documents. Key features include an online document report designer, merging, stamping, adding barcodes to PDFs, form-filling PDFs, retrieving form-filled information from PDFs, converting images to PDF, encrypting and securing PDFs, retrieving text, XMP, and other information. DynamicPDF is easy to use, has an online document and report designer, intuitive REST APIs, and we have client libraries for C#, Java, Node.js, and PHP. DynamicPDF Cloud API contains the following REST endpoints: dlex-layout, image info, PDF info, PDF text, PDF XMP, and the PDF endpoint. Now let's go to the documentation for this tutorial. So docs, tutorials, Cloud API, creating a PDF from dlex, and there's the tutorial. Let's scroll down and look at the required resources. To complete this tutorial, you must add the Create PDF dlex-layout endpoint sample to your samples folder in cloud storage. And we're going to do that using the resource manager. After adding the sample resources, you should see the Creating PDF-dlex-layout-endpoint folder in the resource manager. From the resource manager, we want to download the JSON to our local file system. And we're going to assume that it's in temp dynamicpdf-api-samples/creating-pdf-dlex-layout. So that's the local folder we're going to create. So let's see, the create PDF dlex-layout.dlex file is going to stay in the cloud. The create PDF dlex-layout PNG has to stay in the cloud, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then there's the create PDF dlex-layout JSON file, which we're going to download, and we'll explain why in a few minutes. So let's go ahead and go to the resource manager. First, we have to log in, so go ahead and log in. And if you don't have an account, you can sign up for an account here, but we're going to assume you have an account, and that takes us to the environment manager. From the environment manager, choose Managed Resources, go up to Samples, then click Add Samples, and you'll see a Create a PDF dlex-layout endpoint. Go ahead and check that, and then click OK. Let's go and look at what's inside, and you can see there's the 3 files that we need. Before we start looking at the endpoint, go ahead and double click on dlex. Notice that it has Create PDF dlex-layout as the title for the dlex, and we also have Create PDF dlex-layout as the JSON file. So in this situation, if you double click on the dlex, the dynamic PDF designer will load the JSON data for you automatically. So go ahead and double click on the dlex file, and that opens it in Designer. And you can see this is the dlex file. It consists of a report and a cover page. So now let's click Run. This will generate the PDF in the browser. And there's the PDF document. You can see we have a page with the report data in it, and then the cover page. Now the watermark is just because this is a trial version. Now let's download the JSON file. And now let's go ahead and delete the JSON file. And let's return to the tutorial. Now, what we're going to do here is we are going to focus on the dlex-layout endpoint. We're not focusing on how to create a dlex document using DynamicPDF Cloud API Designer. Designer performs tasks at design development time using DynamicPDF Cloud API Designer. So if you needed to create a dlex file, you could do that in the Designer. And also you could have your sample JSON in the same folder as the dlex file in your cloud resources. But that's not what we're going to discuss today. In this tutorial, we're going to focus only on the dlex-layout endpoint and assume we already have all the resources we need. Here's how it works. From your client system, that could be a server, your own PC, whatever, you're going to have a JSON data file. So this is how it would work. We're assuming we already have the resources, the dlex template and any embedded resources for that dlex template. So the way it works is the JSON data file should reside in your client system. And that should make sense because you don't want to have your data, your proprietary data in the cloud. So then you make the call to the dlex-layout endpoint, passing the JSON data file. The DynamicPDF processing engine will then take that JSON data file. It will take the dlex template and any embedded resources that are in cloud storage, and it will combine that with the JSON to create the PDF. After creating the PDF, it then streams it back to the client system, to the calling system, and you can save that data as a PDF, or you could process it. It returns it as bytes. So now let's consider the curl example. We'll start with curl first before looking at the client APIs. Go ahead and copy the curl command in the tutorial. So just copy and open it in Notepad. And you can see there's the curl command. It's an HTTP post, the dlex-layout endpoint. We have an authorization key, the path to the dlex file, and the path to the layout data. And it outputs it as a PDF document. Now let's copy and paste this into the command prompt. Run it. And let's go look at the PDF. And there it is. So when we double click on it though, Adobe Acrobat can't open it. Now this is a particular feature of curl. Curl just saves whatever the output is as whatever the name you gave it. If we use something like Postman, it would actually return the JSON error message. So what we're going to have to do is open the PDF document as a text document. This is just a peculiarity of curl. Curl just saves whatever the output is as whatever the name you gave it. If we use something like Postman, it would actually return the JSON error message. So what we're going to have to do is open the PDF document as a text document. Let's open it in Notepad. And you can see the JSON error, and it is unauthorized 401. Well, that's telling me that the API key is missing. So we need to add the API key. Let's go ahead and go back to, let's delete this first, since it's not a valid PDF. And now let's go ahead and go back to Notepad. Okay, yeah, we forgot the bearer key. Now, is there anything else we forgot? Let's see. The dlex path looks good. That's the path to the dlex file in the resource manager. And the layout data, that path looks good. That's the path to the JSON document in our local file system. So we need to get the API key, it looks like. So return to the environment manager and click absent API keys, copy, close, and let's return to Notepad. And let's paste the API key. Don't overwrite the bearer. Bearer is important. Now let's run this command in the command prompt. Now let's look at the created PDF. So open it. And there you go. There's the created PDF. Now let's consider the C#.NET example. The complete source code for this project is available from GitHub, and it's the .NET Client Examples project. And of course, it's reliant on the DynamicPDF.API client library for C#, and you can get that on NuGet. And we're going to install that in just a minute when we do the project. So start Visual Studio, wait for it to load. And I'm assuming you already have the .NET Client Examples. You have that solution, so go ahead and load that solution. Wait for it to load. And now we need to create our project. So go up to the solution, right click, add, new project, and console app.NET Core project. Next. Now let's name it. Creating PDF dlex layout. Create. And there we go. There's our barebone project. So now go up to the project and right click. Select Manage NuGet Packages. And then look for DynamicPDF.API. And that's the NuGet package we want to install. So click Install. Okay. Wait for the NuGet package to be installed. Okay, let's close that. And now let's go ahead and start coding. So first we're going to create our run method, static void run string API key string base path. And now let's go ahead, before we forget, let's go up here to the main method and let's change it to call the run method. Just put in key for now. And now let's put in the base path, which is c:/temp /dynamic PDF API samples creating PDF dlex layout /. Okay, now let's go back to the environment manager and get the API key. Paste the key. Now let's go down to the run method and let's start adding the code. So the first thing we're going to create is layout data resource. Layout data resource equals new layout data resource base path plus the name of the JSON file. Create -pdf -dlex -layout.json. Okay, we need to go ahead and add the using statement. So using DynamicPDF.API. Now we're going to create the dlex-layout instance. So dlex-layout equals new dlex-layout. And now we need to add the path to the dlex file, which is in our cloud storage. So let's go to the resource manager and let's see a simple, easy way to get the path. So go to Manage Resources. Right-click on dlex, copy file path. So now it's copied the path in the resource manager to your clipboard. So let's go ahead and go back to the project. Let's go ahead and paste the path. You can see there's the path to the dlex file that is in the resource manager. And now we need to add the layout data resource instance. So layout data resource. Okay, now we need to call the dlex layouts process method, and it returns a PDF response. So PDF response equals dlex layout.process. Now we need to save the response as a PDF document. So if PDF response is successful, we're going to print it out. Otherwise, we're going to print out the error JSON. So else, and let's go back up to the if block file dot write all bytes base path plus the output file name, create-pdf-dlex-output-c#.pdf. Now let's fill in the else statement. So console.writeLine PDF response dot error JSON. So that'll print out the error JSON if there's an error. Okay, so now let's go up to, let's go ahead and run this. So change it from get image info to creating PDF dlex layout. Run. Wait for it to run. And we have an error, and the error is unauthorized. Oh, of course, we forgot our API key again. So let's go ahead and add the API key. So dlex-layout.api key equals API key. Now let's run it. And now let's open the created PDF document. And there you go. There's the report, the data, and there's the cover page. Now let's consider the Java example. The Java example is available in GitHub, and it's java-client-examples, that's the project name. And you install the DynamicPDF client library using Maven, and you can get that from Maven. And the steps are the same as the C# project. Now we're just going to run the class as a standalone file, but if you wanted to compile everything, you would use the POM file, obviously. Now I like to use Eclipse, so go ahead and start Eclipse. Wait for it to load. Launch. I assume you already have the project loaded. Open the creating PDF dlex-layout.java file. It should look familiar. We have our layout data resource, and it's the base path and the file and the JSON file. This, of course, is on our local file system. We create a new dlex-layout instance. We pass the relative path in the cloud API storage, and we also pass the layout data instance. We set the API key. We call process. If it's successful, we save it as a PDF document. Otherwise, we print out an error. So let's go ahead and run it. And there you go, the created PDF, and it's a report. It's the report data and the cover page. Now let's consider the Node.js example. You can get the Node.js example from Node.js client examples, and the steps are pretty much the same as the other two projects, just slight syntax differences. I like to use Visual Studio Code, so open Visual Studio Code, and I assume you already have the project loaded. I also assume that you've already ran npm to install everything. Open the creating PDF dlex layout file, and there you go. We have the layout data resource, the dlex endpoint. We set the API key. Now here I'm setting the base URL. You don't have to do this. This is optional, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it in since it was already in there. And we call the dlex endpoints process method. And we wait for it to return the response. If it's successful, we write the bytes as a PDF document. Otherwise, we print out the error message. And down below, we have the await creating PDF dlex layout.run. And that's just so we can run this as a standalone application. So let's go ahead and run it. Node creating PDF dlex layout.js. Hit return. And now let's go open the outputted PDF. And there it is. So open it. And there you go. There's the report and the cover page. Now let's consider the PHP example. You can get the PHP example from GitHub, and the name is php-client-examples. And we have it in Composer, so you use Composer to get it. And the steps are the same as the other client libraries. I like to use Visual Studio Code, so let's open Visual Studio Code. And I assume you already have the project loaded, and you've done the prerequisite steps to get the required Composer package. And now let's open creating PDF dlex-layout.php. And there you go. So we have our use statements for the layout data resource and dlex-layout. We have our base path, we have our run method, and then we create a new layout data resource where we pass the base path to the JSON document. We create a new dlex-layout instance where we pass the relative path to the dlex file and the layout data instance we just created. We set the API key, we call the process method and get the response. And if it's successful, we output the bytes as a PDF document. Otherwise, we print out the error message. And then we call the creating PDF layout run method just so we can run this as a standalone application. So now let's run it. PHP creating PDF dlex-layout.php. Hit return. Now let's go to the folder, and there it is. Open it, and there you go. We have our report and our cover page. Okay, so let's recap what we've done here in this tutorial. First, we created a layout data resource. And the layout data resource took our base path and the JSON file. Okay, so then we create a dlex-layout instance. In the dlex-layout instance, we got the relative path to the dlex file. And we also passed the layout data instance that we just created. Then we set the API key. Then we call the process method. Now the dlex-layout endpoint returns a byte array containing the PDF. So we want to get that byte array and save it as a file, which is what we do here if it's successful. If it's not successful, then we just print out the JSON error message. So as you can see, using the dlex-layout endpoint is pretty straightforward using the DynamicPDF Cloud API. I'm James, reminding you, when you think PDF, think DynamicPDF Cloud API. See you next time.